I've never known a love so steady. Even gold won't turn your tide. We flow together like an ocean, every low and every high. And I would have you anyway, dear, any way your heart could bear.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mirror in the Stall, a podcast with Faye, who was the author of Sacred Spaces. And so welcome. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you so much for asking me, and it's such a pleasure to be on here and to spread more word, all these wonderful people that I'm meeting through you and Warwick and all these people, and we're all coming together to do these great things with horses and transform our relationships. It's so beautiful.
Yes, it definitely is. So if you want to share with the people that maybe have not read the book, which I don't know how that's possible at this point, but let us know like what it is you do, like what is your background?
Okay, so my background is very diverse, and it's like how I ended up here, I have no idea. Would not have been a plan in my life, like, okay, now you'll be there, because it was always, horses were always in the plan, of course, of course in there is the underlying thing, but life takes us all these different routes, and I'd get married, and then all of a sudden I'm off doing something completely different and to figure out what I was going to do there, right? So I went and studied environmental science when I got out of school, and so that kind of kept me at the different jobs and things that's kind of when I was working with ecosystems and things that went wrong in an ecosystem and trying to find out how to restore it, and so I was doing that work for many years, and I finally met my husband, which I'm divorced now, but I had met him and I was living in Florida working in wetlands restoration projects, and it was so much fun and I loved it, and I did horse stuff on the side. It was just the perfect life. And then he goes, oh, well, once we got engaged, he said, well, we're moving to Philadelphia and I'm going to medical school. And that was when it was like, whoa, like I'm not a Philadelphia girl. I am not going to do well there. And so, it ended up, okay, if I go there, then I will sacrifice those 4 years that you go through medical school. But in the end, that we're going to have a ranch and I'll have a horse, at least one. And he's like, sure, okay. So, all right, I'm there in Philadelphia for 4 years, and I went into the environmental field more, and I got a master's degree in that, and did some fun work with Park Service, doing trails and all this kind of outside. It's always like, has to be outside work, has to be out there doing something outside. So I was doing that and writing. And then when he was done with school, then we decided, well, let's go to Colorado because it kind of fits into both of our lifestyles. We can have a ranch, we can do the horse stuff, he can work in a rural hospital, and that was the perfect match. And so I spent so many years, I spent over 20 years on this ranch, and it's in the middle of nowhere in northwestern Colorado, and it's absolutely beautiful. We have a river that runs through the property, and all this wildlife. Any kind of wildlife you can imagine is there. And so every day of my life is outside. Like I'm up as soon as it gets light out. I'm up playing with horses. I'm out feeding cattle. I'm doing hay. I'm doing all these things that are so much about the earth and being grounded and being away from people. And it was a time that I was really wanting to do more training with the horses. I worked with some different natural horsemanship trainers and worked one-on-one, and every time there was a clinic anywhere that was driving distance, and that means like a day, essentially, like I would just take the trailer and head off and do a weekend clinic. And so I went with a lot of different trainers, and whether they were natural horsemanship or reining or dressage or driving. So I just kind of immersed myself in that whole horse world, and then I came home, and then I was immersed with the horses at home. And it was during that time that I was thinking, I really was starting to speak to horses, but not in the way of like in your mind, like with words. It was almost through just feeling, just knowing that something might happen, or being with the mares when they were going to foal, and I would talk to them and put my hands on their stomach and talk to the babies, and it just kind of immersed it. I would begin to know something before it happened. And there was one story where I had been gone, of course, and it was middle of February, like it is now, and it was probably before that, it was probably 20 below for like a week or two before that. And then we had this weird midwinter warm spell, and the river had thawed out. Usually the horses would just walk over the river during the winter, and it's, several inches of ice, so they didn't fall in. Well, this particular time I came home and I go in the house and I thought, oh no, I better go look at the horse. And I went out there and I just got there when I saw the horse go under the water again, and he had gone through the ice in the river. And I'm by myself and I'm like, what am I going to do to get this horse out? And that intuition was the thing that saved that horse that day, because otherwise I would have been inside just getting my stuff unpacked and doing different things. But I kept having this nagging feeling, please go out and check the horses, go out and check. And sure enough, there was something that had happened, and they're going, okay, what am I going to do? And I go get the tractor and get the ropes and chains, and I'm like, he's got to come out one way or the other. So I'm like, managed to tie a rope to my back belt and then onto the tractor, so in case I had to pull myself back out of the river. And so I'm there trying to get a rope around his stomach, because I'm like, I don't know how else I'm going to pull him out of here. So I finally get that around him and pulled him out. But it was those times when I really was clear on, we need to listen to our inner voice, that thing that tells us. And what I noticed on being on the ranch was the inner voice is louder because there's not all this other noise that's out there grabbing our attention, trying to keep us from being in our own bodies and in our own minds. So that's kind of my background. I just did the ranch and training horses for years. It was blissfully wonderful, and I learned so much about what I talk about in the book. It's like, it's not just about physical training, it was about the mental part, but I couldn't find people that would help me with that. That was not a common thing to go out there and ask people for help with. This, what about my emotions? How do they affect my horse? And people are like, yeah, well, just keep your act together, just don't get all stressed out. But to go into the refinement of it, of what are we really talking about, and how do we really affect our horses? That was the question that started coming up, and for me to really start as I was showing horses and going, okay, I'm affecting this horse really badly in the show ring because of my nerves. And it's like, where do I go for help with that? At the time, nobody. And so it's, doing that exploration, and that's really how this all kind of transpired over a period of 20 years of like looking for different answers at different places. So my hope is now that journey that I went on, people streamline their own journey, because they won't have to go up and look piecemeal and like, where do I get this information? How do I find that? It's like, now we're seeing people like you, people like Warwick out there spreading this other way of doing things with horses and giving people this information.
I had said before, I knew that I started diving into this side of it, and it was so scary for me to go beyond what it looked like I had been doing for so long. So starting to tap into that stuff with my clients and like, well, just try this, and not knowing how they were going to respond, and kind of really focusing on that piece over the last like 4 years. And then thinking, oh, everyone was telling me, you have to write a book, you have to write a book. And then all of a sudden, all of my clients are like, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. And I got it and read it in probably 3 days and was like, 100%. I was like, I don't have to write my book anymore. So thank you. But it's so
good. Well, I'm sorry, but
no, it was really heavy. And I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. But I felt like that, what the things that you spoke of and how you articulated it and how you brought in all the different aspects of it, even the scientific side of it, is so important, because for the people that will shut down right away to anything looking woo-woo, when they say energy, because that was me before, where I was like, what energy? Okay. But it's like, no, actually, and I'd stumbled upon, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and started pulling from that and going, oh my gosh, I can now say this in a way where the people that want to analyze it and they want the proof of it, now you can go here, like this, right here, just like this.
And that's exactly what I felt compelled, because at the time when I was on the ranch and I was doing some of it, I had some of that, from going and listening to Dr. Dispenza and all that. I had some pieces of it, and I'm like, if I want this to go mainstream, if I want this to be accepted out in the world, then it has to be different than, like you say, the woo-woo piece, where it's just like, oh, I can sprinkle fairy dust on my horse and then it does this thing, and isn't that beautiful? It's like, no, I wanted to know every aspect of what was happening, and I knew it was internal, and that's why it's like why I went to school again. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was just like this, this span of time. Okay, I want to do that just because I want to know the answer, but if I'm going to teach this, I need to know how this works. Every aspect of why this works and how it works, so that when I go out, I can replicate that. Whatever happens, I can replicate that again, and I can give people some skills that they can take, and they can replicate it all. It wasn't just about me knowing how to do it. It was about me being able to teach it in a way that people would be able to understand and implement it themselves, that I didn't always have to be there. They could go and do it on their own.
Yeah, definitely. And that piece, that when you start getting so present and tapping into that part of you that you wonder sometimes, like, is this my imagination? Am I hearing voices in my head? But when you're little, when you're young, before you grow up and you get all this life experience and conditioning from people that tell you, no, that's not the way it is. You're kind of innately tapped into that. And I don't feel like people sometimes understand that every single human has the ability to do this. Once you start uncovering all of those layers and stripping away those beliefs that you can't do stuff like this, and you just can spend time getting quiet, then allowing all of that to come in, it's so powerful for people and so healing for people.
And I think for me, it's very important that people have permission to have those experiences, because I know one of the reasons I'm not married anymore is because it really bothered my ex-husband that, well, how do you know that stuff? And it was frightening him. You could see how it made him so uncomfortable with his belief system and how it didn't align with that. And as it got more and more, you could just see it was like, it was inevitable. It was like, I can't stay with this person and he can't stay with me because I make him uncomfortable and I feel stifled and frustrated because I can't express who I truly am and all aspects of myself. And I think whatever you want to call God or the universe or something was looking out and saying, okay, you've done your learning time here. And now you know what this is about. Now we're going to take away this comfortable life you have, and we're going to put you out there, and you're going to have to start doing something with this so that it's not just in your little valley, and you keep it to yourself. And, that for is a really big introvert, it's like, oh my gosh, you mean I got to get out and oh no. And, I have to get out of that comfort zone. And I think that's what part of this training is. Like, you are comfortable in your training regime that you do now. You're comfortable with, even if you don't get good results or whatever, you're dedicated to it and you're comfortable in that space. And all I'm doing is coming in and going, okay, I'm going to make you uncomfortable maybe, because we're going to look at things that really go against the belief system that you've established about how this has to work and what is going to happen. And if that's too much for you, then don't go this direction. But if you're open and interested, you're going to find these amazing places that you're going to go now.
Yeah, I had this I would say that my growth in the last month even is you just don't think you can go any deeper sometimes. Like, I think I'm so conscious and I'm so aware and I'm make sure that I, you know, when I feel off, I talk to one of my coaches in my toolbox that I have, and it just keeps going deeper and deeper. But that in the last 2 weeks, maybe, I was out with a client and I realized, I was like, I have to give myself permission to allow people to be in their discomfort. Like, I'm not holding the space for you in this session to make you feel good after, because I've got some clients that are going through some pretty big stuff with their horses. And it's like, I just have to, I'm here to kind of bridge that gap between you and your horse in this time, but like, this is for you. So I'm interested to know if you find, well, I'll talk to one particular situation, which I find right now is pretty impactful. And it's a horse I own, and I'm leasing him out. I've had him for 10 years. And I was speaking a little bit to like soul contracts, like in our lifetime, whether it be an animal or another person coming into our life to highlight these places where we need to heal. And this horse has become incredible. And I'm not even incredibly adamant about, you will not brush me. And I'm talking, when I say that, I mean biting, throwing his whole body at her. I've owned this horse for 10 years, and I did a video, and I was like, do you mind if I video this? Because this is what someone would bring to a trainer and say, this horse has a major behavioral issue. Like, let's fix it. But at one point I had her hold the camera, and I took the brush over to him and just started brushing him, and he was fine. And I was like, he's here for you for this piece, because I have other people brush him, nothing. But I kind of feel like specifically for her, he's showing this to her so she can work deeper on that piece. So do you find that that's like a truth that they they kind of know that, no, this is for me and you to work out, this is for me to help you with, and they have that person that they're dealing with in that level?
Absolutely. And I make it a point, and I haven't gone out there big time, you know, I don't do a whole lot of videos, and work that I do is relational, and it's between the person and the horse, and it's about me being in the background, so and guiding a little bit, but it's for me to help that person figure out what's going on there within the relationship. And it's not, you know, sometimes I'll be in, if it's a dangerous situation, or I think, okay, this needs to happen. But for the most part, I want the person to come to their own conclusions about what am I bringing in, and I'll give them some different skill sets, and like, let's try this. Can we try this other thing now? And so I kind of work really in the background, but really trying to help them find that place with their own horse. And me not being in there going, I can establish a relationship with your horse, why can't you? It's like, it has nothing to do with me, just as you know. It has to do with whatever each one of those two beings brings to the table, and what they each need to learn from that situation. And so I try to be as invisible as I can within that. But I have noticed, and I think it's a societal thing, is how not only horses are shut down, but people are very shut down. They don't even know who they are, and they have a very difficult time. I'll say, tell me an emotion, we're going to work through the emotion thing, and they're like, I don't have emotions. What are you talking about? I said, well, think about a time maybe you had an emotion, and they shut that part of themselves off for so long that they can't even resurrect it on their own. And so that's a lot of my work, is just like, okay, here's what the emotion is like. I'm going to set it. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to set that space, like you say, holding the space. I'm going to put that emotion here, and by the way that the entrainment works, you're going to start to feel that also. And it may be very foreign for you, but it's this part of like knowing our inner self a whole lot better is going to help us with this horse stuff. And I notice a lot of times that, you know, people want to focus on, it's this behavior, I don't like this behavior the horse does. And I say, they go, don't you notice that behavior? I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm not going to focus on that, because that's not the problem. As you know, that's never, the behavior is just a manifestation of things that haven't been addressed before, or energy that's blocked and hasn't been expressed. And so they go, yeah, but but the behavior. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because what we're going to do, and I'm 100% sure, is that the behavior will no longer exist once we get to this place in ourselves. Okay. And all the time, it's like a lot of times the horses are nipping or biting the person. It's a common one, you know. They're like, why aren't you correcting him? And it's like, well, there's lots of reasons, you know. First of all, the horse has a little extra energy and he's trying to express something and nobody's listening, or he's insecure, or he's very troubled, he's got high anxiety. So am I going to hit something with high anxiety and make their anxiety worse? Because they're going to have to escalate that behavior at some point, right? So connect with themselves, ground with themselves, get totally focus off the horse. I say, let's not even pay attention to the horse. And by the time they've gone the process of grounding and looking at their emotions and running some different ones, the horse is calm. Horse is not displaying the behavior anymore. Right. And they're like, well, that's crazy. It's like, yeah, he's just, like you say, the mirror, right, of something that's going on.
Yeah, I think the cool part about them is that they kind of access something that you can't even see. So for her, she felt like, I said, what does that look like to you? And she said, that looks like anger. It looks like frustration. And she's like, but I don't have that. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because he's kind of, you know, if that's your perception and your version and story about what he's giving you, you might want to look deeper at that, because I don't know if he agrees with you. But just asking yourself those better questions and kind of digging and going deeper. Well, what does it look like to you? It looks like anger. What is anger? Or just even, because I feel like we do that with other people too, like driving down the freeway. If we're in a place where we're already frustrated and someone cuts us off, we're immediately going to assume this person is XYZ, versus if you're having an amazing day and you're driving down the highway and someone cuts you off, it can be a completely different response from you, because you're only, seeing from the lens that you're in at that moment. And I feel like those horses are the same way, and being really careful about the language you use around it is something I've kind of been more, I almost said aggressive earlier, and then I was like, he's displaying that he doesn't like to be brushed. Because I feel like when people hear the words that they say over and over, it becomes that almost. So do you ever speak to, as far as like the language around?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah. So when you, when you show up to a client's place, or do you do like one-on-one sessions? I think I saw that you do clinics and stuff. Like, what does that look like when you do those things?
They can look a lot of different ways depending on what to get out, because I could do just a straight training, training with energy. That's a whole different kind of where, okay, we're going to take a horse and we're going to look at the subtleties of how you can use energy in your training, how you can use it in your riding to actually take your riding from a certain level, how you manipulate. I don't like to use the word manipulate, but how you control that energy in different ways so that you create different situations. Like, let's say you want your horse to do a piaffe or some other movement, and it's like, okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about that you have to bring the energy up in that horse, and now what you're going to do through the physical aids, which I always use very soft physical aids. It's like you're going to put a little bend in this horse, and you're going to put in your body the way that you want to shape that energy to a form that presents as that piaffe or that passage or something that you're going to do. And so it's really getting into the nuts and bolts of the fine tuning of how you can use the energy, not just for connection with your horse, but for communication into their own body. Like, you meld with their body and you show them how to run their energy through the body and how you mold it into a shape and make this beautiful. Because I'm always looking for, I want this to be soft, and I'm always telling people in my clinics, I want it to feel like butter. We have butter. And feel, because then we know we've gone through those resistance, where energy, anytime we have a resistance in the horse, that's a block in the energy flow through that horse. And so if I'm in a clinic with somebody and we see that block come up in the horse, we're going to stop and we're going to address where the energy and why is it not flowing in that nice round circular way that I like in it. And how can we remove that block? And is it in the person or is it in the horse? Is it in both? So it's this wonderful, like, just beautiful place to be in where you go, okay, we're just going to look at this and diagnose, and how do we make this more beautiful and more soft and more flowing? And I want people to feel what it's like to be on a horse that you don't have to hardly do anything to get him to do different things. And I know for so many people that I run into, they're so used to fighting the horse. They're always fighting the rein, somehow in the reins, the leg aids are hard, everything's hard, and they're just exhausted when they're done riding. It's like, you know what? When you can go and start teaching your horse this new vocabulary, that you're going to be very fluent in the energy and the way you project it, and that you have control and knowledge and awareness of what you're putting out there and how you're using it, the horse starts going more and more relaxed and more happy in the work, because that energy language is the clearest language we can possibly have. It's clearer than our weight aids, it's rein aids, clearer than our seat, it's clearer than our voice. It's perfect. And then we're getting that from the horse too. As we become more aware, we're getting that feedback. So it's this beautiful loop. And that's what maybe more than anything else, I want people to experience that, because I don't think there's a lot of opportunities that people have had to know that exists out there, and that it is a goal, and that you could reach that place.
Mhm.
And so that's a long story. That was one of the things I do in a clinic. And there's other, there's things about connection. Connection is a huge piece, as you know, Warwick. That's a huge question people have. And so we'll go through that whole connection piece with people with their horse, and because that has to happen before you go to these more advanced places with the energy, because without the connection, you have no communication. You're just speaking and the horse is not hearing.
Right.
You. So being the crux of many things I do.
Yeah. And speaking to that piece, I always think of when people are riding and they have performance issues, I always go back to, well, where does the stiffness in the body start? It starts from them feeling like they're not safe. So why wouldn't you start there? Why are we pushing so hard through, a horse is stiff on the right, or doesn't move forward, that makes them lazy, and diving into like, well, if your horse feels safe to move, or safe to be still, or safe to be balanced, then all of the behavioral issues and performance issues go away. So I've been starting with just when we're in the round pen, identifying right off the first bat of what does your horse need to feel safe. So if it's a horse that's just tearing around the round pen, it would mean it needs to feel safe, going slow. And just that piece alone for people, because it gives them kind of something to figure out and identify and focus, it feels like melts away a lot of the pressure of, well, but my issue is not in the round pen, it's in the arena. And I'm like, it's the tension in the body that's the issue, and it starts here. So let's start here.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I love that, being able to identify once they're on too, and going, okay, where does it start? And, where do you feel it? Because I find so many people, through whatever their life circumstances or experiences, are so detached from their own body. And then they're trying to put this horse together, which is a totally different entity, and be connected with it when they're not even connected with themselves. So I think that's really cool that you're doing that in your clinics. I love that.
Yeah. And I think I know I had a woman recently, and I wrote about this in my book, but it's like she had gone, okay, in your book, you talked about this woman doing the side pass or a leg yield, and it was really easy, and I want to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of factors whether or not we can do that. And it starts up here in the person, because you have to be at a certain place that you can let go of expectations. You can find that place of relaxation in your entire body, and then you can start doing those kind of things. And she did end up, after the end of the thing, it's like, okay, so it feels like what people have been taught a lot is that you're always yelling at your horse through your aids. They're always than they need to be. And the horse is like, use your inside voice, like inside voice, not the outside. Okay. And so when I could get her to the place where, believe me, you can do this through the inside, you're going to teach the horse the vocabulary. We break this maneuver down into its component parts. It's not the whole little pieces. And so we're going to go in and make sure we have each piece in place, that he understands this means when I do this with my body, when I do this with the energy, it means this. He goes, okay. And then we do the next thing. And then we add them all together. And then she's like, wow, floating across the arena. Okay. And I just want people to have that, like probably you've realized, like once they get that feeling, it's like addictive because I want to feel that again. I want to do it. And so that's self-motivating. And that's what I always love about this work. It's like, I don't have to keep telling them because they're going to go, okay, I really like that and I want to do it again. So, okay, I will help you then. But I can't help you if you don't want to. I can't make it happen for you. And again, so I'm standing in the background voice. It's just guiding you to that place you can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And then when we think about, energy being blocked in the horse's body, I'm curious to know how you feel about this. So a while ago, this is before I really understood like what was going on. I had a horse that was super cinchy, and what I had done with him was done a couple of things where I would just drop his head, let him switch over nervous systems, and it almost became like clicker training with like dopamine. So I could drop his head and I knew that he would feel good.
Right.
And so that would put my hand any place on his body that would kind of trigger him, and then stay there long enough and hold the space of no agenda. I just want you to rewrite the story about what it is to be touched here. And then I would drop his head until he'd feel my hand go, oh, wait a minute, this actually isn't something that I need to be so defensive of. And I kind of did that all over, anywhere I could find on his body, that would make him tense up, and I would just stay there until he would relax. And then I would move to the next place. And then the next day I was like, I don't know if what I even did made a difference, but as soon as I put him in the cross ties and I went to put the saddle pad on, he dropped his head and just started yawning. It's like we had made a new trigger for a relaxation response. And I'm wondering, I've witnessed it enough, and I just don't know if people talk about that piece ever, or if it's anything that resonates with you or the work that you do.
It's absolutely, and it's so funny. I always think that somewhere up above in that internet of intuition, which I talk about on Warwick's site, is that we get this information, and it's for people who are open, and it goes in, and it's like, let's try this. Because I did a very similar thing with this off the track thoroughbred. The first time I'm like, he's so anxious, and I'm just going to essentially, at that time, I would put my hand on him like that, and I would show him the state that I was in. Like I would make sure I was in that really good space, and then I would show him what that feels like. I would share it, kind of like the Vulcan mind meld, essentially, and say, here's what it feels like, and start giving him that place of like, my brain is addicted to these anxiety chemicals, but let's get a little dopamine and oxytocin in there and see what happens. And they're like, you give them a little bit of it, and they're like, whoa, what was that? And so I'll step away and I'll go away, and then I'll come back, and they're like, yes, more please. And so it's that beautiful place where you're starting to be able to take them from the sympathetic to parasympathetic through that touch, and then you can do it through breathing. There's different ways, but it one of the very first things I'll do with horses, especially if it's an uncertain past and they're having a lot of behavioral things, is I will do a trauma release, which is very similar to what you're talking about. I'm looking in the body. Where is this trauma stored? How can we get him to release that? And so there's different techniques on that part of it, but it's that same similar concept. And I love that, because now we're getting to the place where more impaired people are getting in the intuition place where they're receiving this information and doing these things like out of the blue, but they're very similar to things other people are doing. And that's actually happening now. that there's enough people that are open and they're getting this information going, well, I'll do it in my own special way, because everybody has their way to do it. And so it's like your own little technique that you get. And it's like, this is what I'll do with the horse to get him relaxed, to, help some of this tension or stress or stored trauma in his body and help him move it out. Okay. And so I find that that is very important to start with. And usually I won't work with a person until I've done that process, just because that will rule out a whole lot of things that will come up later on in their relationship, in their connection. And so why not know those things and see as much as we can release? And then, as you probably have found, like as you're working with the horse, you'll see, oh, something else just bubbled up. Okay, let's go and do that process again and see if we can release that thing, because now that's ready to go. He's ready to let that go. So it's beautiful. I love it. I love you doing that.
Yeah, and then you just saying that now he's ready to let it go actually made me think of just stuff within my personal life that I tried to work on a couple years ago with one of my theta practitioner, and then just maybe a week or two ago, I was working with my craniosacral person and talking about, oh my gosh, like we've identified this thing 2 years ago that I was like, I'm just going to have to let that one be because I don't know how we're getting around that one. But, it got to the point where I identified it again and was like, oh, that's so interesting. But at that point, then I was like, oh, I understand it now. Now I can release this from my body. It was like, and she had pointed out, she's like, well, they have to be ready. You have to be ready. And so I look at these horses and I had one experience right before I really stepped into, okay, we have to deal with you, speaking to the owner, where I was asking these horses to release and let this stuff go. And I had one horse in particular who I was doing the body work with, and he reared straight up and had landed, and I sat quietly and I heard very loudly, like, how dare you ask me to let this go when I need this right now? And I was like, I really have to start talking to the people about this because I was asking him to let something go that was protecting him, and it wasn't fair to do. And so from that moment on, I was like,
right.
Oh, yeah. So identifying, is he ready to let it go now, instead of working on something so hard because it's there, just waiting for them to actually, that's a really,
right.
That's a big thing that I haven't actually identified till I write this second.
And it's very important you bring that up because, and I've told you, I've worked one-on-one with people with their horse. Like I don't do things separate from the horse. It's all that. And so when I'm doing that release of the trauma and that process, the owner has to be there in the vicinity of the horse, because I asked the owner, it's like a two-way thing, because as you know, there's a lot of shared trauma between the person and the horse. They pick the horse or the horse picks them. Something happens that they're dealing with many of the same things, or the horse is mirroring that thing that needs to be fixed. And so I will tell the person, okay, so here's where this spot is. Are you ready to give him permission to let it go? Because it has to be verbalized from the person, the owner, that you can let that go. You don't need to hold that for me. Right. And so then the horse will have oh, thank goodness, finally, I don't have to hold that. And you can see the relief. And so it's such a beautiful, like, two-way process and of like identifying it. And it's not a one-time process. It's like there's people who go, well, we did that, now let's do more. It's like, no, that's not the time to be the human and say, oh, that worked, let's do more. I will do very little. I'll go in, like you, it's like intuitive, like, no, that was enough. That's enough for this session. And I will just let the horse go and simmer on that. And the beauty of the energy work is if you give the intention, it continues to work after the session, and it's the correct dosage at the right time. Like I'm a human. I don't know how much that horse needs. And my own brain, I think, oh well, I could do this, or I could, no, I'm getting to the point where, okay, I just put the intention out, work on that, and then I get to go take a break. I don't have to do anything. I've just put the intention out there, and it's working, and I can step away and be okay. It'll do whatever it's supposed to do without me needing to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I think people have a hard time, but you should control it. You should know that this is the real problem. It's like, I don't know that's the real problem. Only the horse, only God, only somebody knows what the real problem is. That's not for me to decide.
Right.
And if I do, then I'm inflicting my own belief system on the healing process or what is happening. And it's no, I think it's much, it works out a whole lot better when I just let it be what it is and do its own work.
And I know people get hung up on, so maybe you can clarify this a little bit with the difference between intention and having like an agenda or a goal. Because I know people like, well, I set my intention, and my intention is I would like to do this, this, and this. And then I say, well, you have to let go of the outcome, right? You can have that, but let go of what it looks like, because whatever is supposed to happen within this is going to be exactly what it is. And people are like, well, I don't understand.
And I think that's the metaphor for my life. Like when I tried to control my life, did things work out the way I wanted? No, because it's so hard to like, because then there's expectations, and then there's disappointments, and there's all this stuff that's wrapped into these goals and this time frame you have to put on the goal. And so I'm more of like, I think that's one of the hardest things, and you've probably found that too, or you wouldn't be mentioning that can you let go of the need for it to look a certain way and be a certain outcome? And I don't know how to tell somebody that, because that has to be their own journey to why do you need that to work that way? What is the reason behind that? And so that's them getting to that very advanced place of this work where I don't need an outcome to prove I do this, to prove anything to anybody. And I think when I first started going out into clinic situations, I had that same kind of feeling like, what if nothing happens? What if I do all of this stuff that I do and they see nothing? And am I going to be okay with that? And I had to go into that looking at it like, wow, I'll look like an idiot, or they'll just know I'm a fraud, or, I had to go through all those internal reasons why I needed something to happen and go, wow, that's pretty selfish, or that's not helpful to anybody but you. And so when I could walk into the space and go, I'm going to set the energy, I'm going to do my very best to hold this space and hold this place, and whatever happens will happen. And what is so amazing that when you can get a client to that place where just let it be, don't worry about what's going to happen, or if it's anything happens, that they will have the most amazing things show up, that like, even if I planned that down to the my detail, I could not have created that situation that just happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, the wonder. And it's like to step into that place of like wonder. I wonder what will happen. And that's why when I do my work, and I've done a little handbook that I'm going to teach with, I've taught with it with my book, but it's about that wonder. And can we be in that place of just thinking of things as an experiment rather than it has to happen? Because coming from the science background, if we experiment, it doesn't matter what the outcome is, because we're just gathering information, we're gathering data, and we're going to go, well, that didn't work out. I wonder what I could change next time. So it puts you in a whole different mindset of it doesn't have to be anything. And actually that information that comes in about how it didn't work gives you a whole lot of stuff you can use later on, because you go, well, I tried that before and that didn't work. So probably I would cross that off the list. Okay. But it gives you like a lightness to your work with the horse. And so it's not like I have to accomplish this within this time and it has to look like this. And, it's just a harder mindset for us in our society to think of, can we do something without a goal? And what is the difference between when you have just an intention and a goal? And those are two different things. Like an intention is like a lighter place of, I think of it, the goal is like you have to achieve that, right? And the intention, when I go out, I will make my intention with the horse merely something like the horse will be more relaxed when we're done. The the person will have a fun. They'll be able to stay in this light place. We'll be able to maintain an emotion that's light and airy. So it's all the intentions that I pick are very light in the way that there's no failure associated with them. Like, oh, well, I could keep my emotion for this long, positive emotion, and then it fell off. Like, well, that's no judgment there. It's like, okay, the next time I'll hold it longer. And so I don't know if that answered your question or not, but it's a complex idea to get past people.
Yeah, I like I like the idea of when you it kind of makes me think about like Abraham Hicks. I don't know if that might be way out of the horse world at this point, but speaking about like manifestation and working with law of attraction. And she always says, well, if you have this goal of this picture of exactly what you want and it doesn't work out, you get really hung up on what's not working out. But if you go general and it just puts you in this place that feels good, then you get yourself into a flow and everything kind of comes in because of where you're at. So with the intentions being less specific and more general of like, how do you want to feel after today? And what is the experience you
Exactly.
want to have in your body, rather than I need to get my horse to canter from a standstill and then pee off at the other end. And then if not, I'm like, that question of if not what, I think that's where the gold is. If you don't make that happen, what happens? And I think that's the piece that blows people's minds. Like, oh.
Yeah. And I think in that same thing of when we're so goal driven, it's like we miss those beautiful points in between. Because what if you go in as, like I say, my goal whenever I get on my horse is I want to feel this softness. I want to feel like I'm floating, or I put that in and I want to feel like, it's just all just flowing beautifully. And, there's little hiccups here and there, but it's like I'm finding that I'm seeking the feeling that I want to maintain rather than the goal I want to achieve. Okay. And so that in itself is motivation, because what if you got to that pee off and it just felt horrible?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be okay because you got to the goal, but it felt horrible?
Yeah. 100%. I think that's the difference, right? Even if you get to the thing you think you need to achieve to feel a certain way, what if when you achieve it, you don't feel that way? Then what, right? Like, so how do you actually what is the feeling you're reaching for in getting that thing you think you need to get it? Try feeling it first and then seeing what happens. I think that's what gets you kind of into the flow that allows that kind of stuff to happen.
Absolutely. Because I think sorry, that delay again, the wonderful delay. One of the things that I talk about is that carrier frequency for when we have an intention. And I think I talked about it with Warwick on his side. It's like, okay, so I had intention, but then I'm going to put it on a carrier frequency of a positive emotion, love or joy or serenity, or I'm going to put that on there and I'm going to send it as a group. So the actual intention is being carried through to that horse through that emotion. And horses, as you know, are emotional. They're reading the emotions in their environment. And is it safe? Is it not safe? And so every intention that I send is going to have that carrier emotion on it. That's a positive one. Okay. And it all sounds so like Pollyanna, but it's really not. It's like once you get to that place, and you're running through your emotions and you're aware of them all the time, and like you can change them at different times. Oh, now the horse needs more support here, so let me change that carrier emotion I have into something that's more supportive for what he's struggling with right now or whatever. So it's such a fluid, everything flows. It's such a fluid process when you're doing this in a complex way.
Yeah, that's so good. So I'm looking at the time. We've definitely passed our 45-minute mark, but I really wanted to talk about one more thing that stood out for me, because as I got to the end of the book, I believe that's where it was, or it's where my brain thinks it is you talked about being okay with pushing them into their threshold or to a level of discomfort. Because I think sometimes people want it to look like magic. And sometimes when you're working through horses that have a lot of trauma, or people that have a lot of trauma, sometimes they do get uncomfortable and it doesn't look pretty. But being able to hold the space of safety and calmness while they're going through it takes them over to the other side of it, is what I think is what helps them get through it, but not avoiding it per se.
Right. And I think, the more I do with the trauma with horses, the more the threshold is a very complex idea. And it's like, if you've had a horse, say, a lot of my horses that I trained, it's like they got pushed to the threshold, but not kept there sustained for a long time. They knew they could reach that and then back it off, reach it, back it off. And then they're all good. Like, I can handle a very long time of stress because, they're acclimated to the fact, like, they're self-regulated and they know that it won't last forever. However, I'm seeing sometimes now with a lot of horses that have severe trauma or have been trained in a way where they were always in sympathetic, and so they never had a back off relief valve, that when you push them up to the threshold, you see a behavior, something that is just over the top. Like, all of a sudden it triggers a whole bunch of stuff in the brain and behaviors. And so then you've got this mess. And so that's why I like the threshold works with the horses that have very low levels of that stress response coming in, and the ones that do highly reactive response that's over the top, that I would like to go, like you were talking about, go back with those horses and take that trauma pieces over time, so that they're beginning, like you were saying, you give them the dopamine hit, you give them the oxytocin, you give them those hits, so they're starting to see, like, okay, it's not going to be the end of the world. I don't have to go into flight, fright, or freeze, fawn, whatever, when I hit that threshold. Okay. And so those horses are kind of the atypical, where you've got to have a little more awareness of, like, where are they at, what's triggering them, how do we help them and support them through that, so that we can restructure this brain, restructure the nervous system, so it doesn't overreact every time. So that's a complex answer to that question, with the threshold. But, I think there's so many people that are now, we're aware of those things. And so we're going to really pay closer attention to what does that horse need to support it through this thing.
Right.
And if we push it beyond that, and it's going into that PTSD place where people, when you see the people go in that, then you can do nothing with that. And so, can we get rid of the PTSD before it starts and give them another response?
Yeah, perfect. Had a question, and it is Megan. If you are still on here, let me look for Megan. Yes, she's here. Here, let me unmute you. Unmute you.
Hi.
Oh, I know you. I think I know you.
Yeah, I messaged
I think
you.
I got a yes, and I was over here trying to set up the internet, so I apologize for not getting back, but good to see your face.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. It's cool to meet you. So interestingly enough, on this call, my trainer rode my horse today, and she did fine with him. I mean, he got sticky, but he didn't rear with her. So I was like, cool. But I almost, like, I don't know, while you were talking, I was thinking about it a little bit more, and he's always sort of been sticky going forward, even like after we've solved the ulcers. So I don't know if it's like his memory of getting with the ulcers or whatever, he was just sticky, but he never reared with me with the ulcers. So that's interesting. But he dumped me on Sunday. And so I fell on the right side, and it's actually funny because I fell on my hip, but I feel it more in between my shoulders and in my neck. So I'm like, okay, like, is he wanting me to feel what he's feeling? Or like, is that where he's stuck and I'm stuck there now? He's all like, here, look, let me just throw you the right way. Or I don't know. Because I did a lot of self-work with Amber over the weekend, the day before. And I released like, you know, needing to protect my loved ones, that I can't protect them all the time. So that's like, I released that, and I released my guilt around my previous horse who's now retired. Because I've never had two horses before. So for me, it's hard to split between two and feel like I'm loving them equally.
Yeah.
But I was able to release that too. And so I was like, cool, we're gonna have a great lesson Sunday. And Sunday he dumps me. So I'm like, cool. So what else? What else? So like, I don't know what else, you know?
Okay. I would go with Amber and do that release on his body. Like, you don't have to be touching him necessarily, but I go ahead and first of all open the bladder meridian like 3 times. I'll just go down from a distance and just like say, we're going to work on you, and I'm doing it and run down that bladder meridian on the horse, and then get him ready to do that, and then go ahead and see if, like, I wouldn't go up to him. I a distance and just run your hand along that bladder meridian line and find those spaces where he has some type of reaction. Okay. And then with you and her together working on that, you can tell him you can let that go now. Because it could be you released your piece of it, but he didn't get to release his piece of it. So he's trying to draw you back into that cycle.
Okay.
So go through and you'll see if you get to that place, like if he has any kind of, like, watch new changes in him, his breathing, his his nostril, everything, like little twitches in the body. They'll tell you right away if you're in a place where trauma is held. Okay. And then you can step away then, because you've identified that place, and just give him permission. And I always turn my energy, once I'm there, I'm energy on him here, like finding the spot. As soon as I find it, I turn my energy away from him and say, you can let that go. And it's important for you to say that to him and for her to work with you on that. So it's always good on this to have an observer person and the person doing the work. So you work in tandem on this. And I can, privately, I can go through a lot more things with you on how to do that if you guys want to do that. And we can kind of find those spaces.
Okay. Yeah, because he was
sounds like
perfect. Like, I've only had him for 2 months.
He's got his own set of things that he's like, well, maybe I should be holding the whole thing now, since she let go of her piece of having to protect everybody. Now I've got to be the entire thing, and it's like too much. I don't,
Yeah, I don't know either. Like, because he was perfect.
We just kind of experiment with it.
Because I've only had him for 2 months, and like we've jumped, we've done an oxer together, and it was like floating on a cloud in the air, and he landed like a gazelle, and I was just like, you're amazing, and I can't wait to jump you more, and we're gonna have so much fun, like, and then all of a sudden this last week he was like, and I was like, what is happening? You're like amazing, and now it's like, this is happening,
Right.
But he's only 7 too, so
honeymoon period over.
And I always think,
honeymoon period over. Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. For a while, until it wasn't.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, and these kind of things, it's like when we get into this work, it's like we realize where it's more complex than it looks like on the surface, and you go through and you find those spots and you let him go, and I think it's kind of like it's like that show House that used to the doctor was on, and he would get all the patients with very odd symptoms, and then he'd have to go in and do all this weird stuff and just find the root cause of the problem and diagnose it. And I look at this as kind of the same way, as that we don't give up at the first time that we try something and it doesn't work, and then we keep going back and okay, now we have that information, and now let's go look here, or let's go look there. So it's and it could be he's come for you to actually do this kind of internal work and to go, I'm not going to take the first answer to the question. That's what that problem is. I'm going to start being super aware and super interested in looking at all these little minute things that could be going on. And I think that's part of the beautiful, it's like, well, he came to teach me all this stuff. Isn't that interesting? Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have gone there had he not kind of forced the issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he got real big real fast. But it's funny because I wasn't like, I still felt safe with him. Like, I was like, okay, like, you're not trying to be mean to me or scare me or whatever. And I didn't feel scared with him, but I was just like, huh, what does this mean? Like, sure, maybe I was meant to fall off because it'd been
Right.
so long and I had PTSD from my last horse over it. And she never dumped me, but I always came like this close, so I don't know, maybe that's what it was or whatever, but my trainer said I rode it great. So
Yeah.
I was like, that's cool,
Okay.
But I'm going to be a horse chiropractor. So I feel like,
Yeah.
they're coming into my life for a reason to teach me stuff so I can have my shit together for when I work with many horses. So.
And what's going to be beautiful is this is the piece that will really help you with that as you're working on the horse. And it's like I noticed, a lot of times like people go, well, why didn't you do the whole horse? It's like you get to a place where it's like, okay, there's a spot I can fit before I even get there. Okay, and I'm just going to work on that spot because that's the spot that's screaming at me and my body. Because you'll probably get to that point where, okay, and if you're not all there already, but you walk up to the horses like, oh, thank you for telling me it really hurts back here. Because I'll walk up and it's like, oh, thank you guys. I'm hurting. It's like giving me this information because they know it's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So,
I
good
can
for
tell
you.
with him.
I'll talk to you later, Megan.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
No, she switched me off, so that's fine.
Oh no, I think that the Zoom is doing weird stuff, so we're just rolling with it. But the time
it was. I guess it decided we were done.
Yeah, I love that piece of, for people that are doing body work and for people that are around their horses, you start to what I kept saying now, my intention for my new group and for the people that I have in my life is that I want you to have a framework, but I want to get you to the place where you're cleared out enough to be able to experiment. And if you get an inspiration to do something with your horse, like roll with it. You don't always have to ask somebody that you think knows more than you, because the only reason I stumbled on any of this is because I gave myself permission to, explore different options when I didn't see anyone doing anything like that. And it was like, this is a little bit uncomfortable. But now that people are getting to that place, people like you and Warwick and all the, trainers that are making that shift, it gives people the freedom to go, oh, wait, maybe I do know more than I think that I've known this whole time. And like, yes, you do.
Absolutely. And that's, and I believe it's like, that's what's going to drive this horsemanship to a whole new place, a whole new level of understanding and sophistication and all of that. And it also needs to happen that we feel a little uncomfortable in that switch and go, okay, are we ready? Yeah. And the more people that make that switch before us, it makes us feel that much more comfortable. Like, well, they're doing it, so I can do it.
Yeah, so good. Anything that you want to say before to feel complete?
I feel like we covered a whole lot of fun things. I think we got in depth on some of these topics, and I think it's just, my takeaway is for people to go and give yourself permission to go find somebody like you or like me or like Warwick or someone that can help support you through this kind of in our thinking and our way of doing things, and just feel comfortable and just let yourself go with the flow, and don't have to have it turn out right or because this is also a journey. It was for me, and I don't know about you, but getting to this place where I am now was a journey. And I had one student go, can't you just make it all just flat and even like this? I said, no, it's going to be like this, roller coaster. And that's okay, because that gives you the stories, that gives you the insights and the knowledge and the depth of understanding.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
They should go. I've got a Facebook page called Science and Spirit of Horses, and they can like that page, follow that page, whatever you do with things like that. They can email me. It's like that shows you how sophisticated I am with it. They can email me at Dr. Susan Fay, DrSusanFay at gmail.com, and I'll be in touch with them through that also. And then, of course, they could read the book, Sacred Spaces, Communion with the Horse Through Science and Spirit. And I look at that as kind of the foundational piece of doing this energy work. It's just the very beginning. I thought when I wrote it, it's like Dick and Jane learn about energy. Oh, it's the very beginning book on how we start thinking about things differently.
Perfect. Yes, definitely. Like I said, I appreciate that book so much, because now I can just tell people, okay, before we start working together, you're going to need to go get this book and read it, and then we can start, because I just love how balanced it is, and how it does leave you with the ability to still remain open to your own ideas. And I just think that right now in this time and place is so important. So thank you so much. I appreciate it so much more than I could ever express.
Oh, well, I appreciate you and people like you who are open to bringing in other people. And I think that's the place we're at now, is like supporting each other in this movement toward a different horsemanship. And I love that everybody has been so open and generous with their time, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.